Hello, welcome to the March 7th, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can submit questions in the live chat field or submit the questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if we could indicate which level of Cubase that you're running. So if you're running Cubase 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, in which version, so whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. And also if you could tell us which operating system that you're running, that information is often very helpful. When asking questions, I will probably be behind and will not be able to necessarily keep up in real time. I'll try my best throughout the live stream to catch up so that we could be as responsive. But if you don't see an immediate response to your question when asked, if you could refrain from reposting the same question. If for some reason I have lost some questions because I get, sometimes it will get so far behind, I'll let you know. But if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, that just kind of slows down the whole process for me to go through all the topics. And we should have all of the topics that are in the live stream today, we should have pinned to the top of the comments field of the video shortly after it'll be several hours after the live stream ends. I have to go back and watch the live stream and type up all the questions with the timestamps. So you could just quickly refer to particular topics that way. If you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to the cubaseindex.com website, and we want to thank Jan for creating that. So I think we're approaching 25,000 questions. So you could search there for those particular questions on any topics that have been covered in live streams. We also want to thank two people that serve as moderators for the live stream. So we want to thank Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this for the benefit of the community. Give them a special thanks. And also kudos goes to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So if you need to find, it's a wonderful resource for different Cubase information, so different tutorials all organized in one central location. So we give Jazz Dude a special thanks for that. All right, so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I basically serve as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products, and I'm the host of the live stream. I'm presenting from outside of in the United States, outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to mention in the chat, just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. One other thing, I mentioned this on the last live stream. If you have, Steinberg will be starting to do kind of more marketing for the particular live streams, and we wanted to actually hear from users how the live streams have been helpful for them. We've gotten a couple videos, but if you wanted to just send a quick video of how the live streams have been helpful for you in getting up to speed with Cubase or learning new features or making new friends, whatever it is, please feel free to create a video and share it to us at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so our first question, why do my final renders sound different from when I'm mixing? I noticed that the final render sounds much cleaner than what I'm hearing while I'm mixing. It's almost as if Cubase is using a lesser quality to keep the tracks playing smoothly, but at the detriment of the audio quality when real-time mixing. Is this true? I know video editing software does this also. So there's no real difference that's going on between the two. So it could be, there's a lot of variables, obviously, when you're doing it. So sometimes we often hear kind of the opposite, and that could be the result of all the processing going on in 32-bit floating point or 64-bit floating point with the audio engines. And we could determine that and set that by going to your studio setup. And then you could change the processing precision of the audio engine. So sometimes hearing it in when it's all mixed down with, and you have the dithering applied, and if you're doing other post processes, that sometimes some plugins that you're using may have a different, may on exporting audio may do upsampling. So there's some plugins that do that on exporting. But if you're doing, but there's nothing that Cubase is doing to degrade the quality of audio to get more tracks to play back. But I've heard even theories, even from like well-known and highly respected mastering engineers, that sometimes even playing back audio off SSDs can sound different than playing audio off of standard hard disks. So there's a lot of variables, but Cubase isn't doing anything to kind of juice the output or to actually juice or to degrade the quality of the audio to get more of it going. And sometimes it's a really hard thing to prove. So unless you've actually, so I'm not sure how you did a comparison between the two files, but it would be, one of the things you could do is take your mixdown file if you're playing it within the same project and maybe do a comparison using supervision and see if there's any differences in levels or any differences in frequencies. But there's nothing that Cubase is doing to degrade the audio quality or the processing to get more tracks to play back. So, but make sure that you've actually done kind of like a blind A/B test, somehow in your comparison as well. All right, wonderful to see Jazz Dude on, and we have Stefan from Sweden. We also have Jan from Stockholm from Cubase Index. All right, and we have Samag engineer, mixing and mastering engineer, checking in. I believe it's from Brazil. Okay, so we see from Billy asks, Billy Felicia, recording many takes and you get the one and want to save the project, but you want to delete the bad takes in the pool that weren't sent to trash. Is there a way to only see what's in the project only? So all you'd have to do, so that if you've done a number of recordings and you've erased a number of different recordings, if you go to your media menu, all you'd have to do is go to remove unused media. So we go to our pool window, and if we could do this, we could right click as well, choose to remove unused media. That will place it into the trash can as kind of a temporary measure. And then if you wanted to delete the trash, you could right click and choose to empty trash. I don't have any items in my trash, but that's all you would have to do to kind of get rid of unused files. So again, go to media menu and just select remove unused files. All right, wonderful to see Agent K on, and we have Benny from Sweden as well. Okay, so we see Alexander Plasko just says, "Hi Greg, thanks for the new supervision tutorial. Exactly the solution I was asking you for." So it's great. Yeah, so there's so I think I've been working hard on doing other tutorials, like little shorter tutorials. So one was posted today on kind of comparing different audio files using supervision. So I'm glad you found it helpful. All right, wonderful to have Patrick checking in live. And we have Soren from Sweden. Gerald Ely was like number 17. And if you do learn a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button so we can continue to do the live streams. All right, so Patrick asks, on project window, stacked layers of parts, I want to arrange things. Can I do that using the project logical editor, like move solo tracks to front row, rename all selected tracks? So I'm not sure if you're doing stacked layers, if you're doing lanes. So let's say if we were here and just doing like a lane recording. So let's say if I arm this track for record. All right, let me just. So I'm not sure if, Patrick, if you're doing MIDI tracks or if you're doing, when you say stacked tracks, if it is using lanes. So I want to arrange things like use a project logical editor, like move solo tracks to front row, and then rename all selected tracks. So if you want it to, add a name. So I'm not sure when you say stacked tracks or like move solo tracks to front row, if like what row they're in for the solo tracks. But if you wanted to rename different elements using, so maybe if you could clarify that would be helpful for me. But if you wanted to rename selected tracks, we could do that in the project logical editor. So if we come here, we'll say, okay, we want to select, we're going to transform, and we want to take our media type. We'll say container type is track, and property is set to the event is selected, and we'll say name. And then if we wanted to append a name, we'll just come over here and say Patrick. And then I could just append the name there. So even if I wanted to put like space, and let's say we undo that. So we'll put a space, and I won't shout at you. So we could do stuff like that, like renaming selected tracks. But if you could clarify the particular, arrange things, move solo tracks to front row, that would be helpful. All right, so we see from Orly just asked, what is the difference between number 1M and number 1000M? I'm not sure what the M is, but maybe if we're in seconds, so maybe we go to where you see milliseconds. So we can see that this is 1 millisecond, where this is a 1/1000th of a second, and this is 1/100th of a second, a tenth of a second, and then 1 second. So maybe it's dealing with when we are in our master time is set to seconds, that these are just 1 millisecond, 10 milliseconds, 100, and 1000 milliseconds. So maybe that's what you're talking about. So those are just different divisions of time. So wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. Glad you could join us today. All right, so we see Johnny Lizard says, hi, I got Cubase 12 Pro from 3 days. All right, congratulations. And that's, I'll just point that out for, I believe until March 28th, there is a, Cubase promotion currently going on. So if you wanted to do updates and do or have friends that you want to get into Cubase, have been thinking about it, it's a wonderful opportunity for that. All right, so we have a question from Alternative Scores. Is it possible to make Mix Console window a tab-based window to have Also, Piano Roll and other sites, thank you for a fantastic product. So, the mix console we could have at the bottom here. So, if you wanted to have the mix console here, if you hit F3, sorry, my Apple switched mine. Let me just. Let me just check a quick preference here. My computer keyboard is acting up on me here. All right, so if you hit F3, you can just come directly to open up the mix consoles. So if you just say, okay, we want to go here to my mix console, we could just open that up. And if you wanted, so I'm not sure when you say you wanted to tab between, we could see our different, so while we have tab open, if I wanted to tab between the different consoles here, but just hitting F3 will open up the mix console. So, but you could tab between the different zones. In the lower zone, you could have the mix console, and if you just wanted to navigate between different events, different tabs here, it's just Alt plus Option. And then you could just use the arrow keys to navigate between different tabs here at the bottom. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And then if you wanted to, so let's say if we have our piano roll here, and if I wanted this to automatically go to like a separate window, you could, there's the preference, and, maybe this is also what you're looking for. If you go to editors, where you could double click opens event in a window. So if I hit apply now, when I double click on particular events, it'll just open up directly into a separate window, and then just hitting F3 will open up your mix console directly into a separate window. So that's going to be kind of fixed by design for that particular shortcut. So let me know if that's helpful or if I misunderstood. All right, so David Griffiths just says hi. He wants everyone to hit the like button and sends thanks for continuing with this excellent resource. So I'm happy to help people. All right, we see Val Lee checking in from Vienna, and just sends a nice message. Let me read it. I want to start today with saying how much I am thankful for your tips, words, lessons with my dearest Greg. I really benefited last week to have everything you taught us. So that's very kind of you to say. Okay, we have a question from Antias. Hello, how to enter artist information, for example, in a new preset of Pad Shop. Okay, so let's come over to Pad Shop. So I'll go to my media bay. All right, so we will come over to Pad Shop. So let's say if we want to come over, so we could see that as we look at this, we can see all of our different information for all of our presets here. And then if we wanted to add other attributes such as artist, at this point we click on the little settings cogwheel, and we will just say audio assets. Let's see if it's under there. Okay, or under staff, you just want to choose artist. All right, so once we have enabled that, we could now just come over here and type in whatever artist information that we want for that particular preset. So if I wanted to type in all right. So, and then we could search. So once you have the artist field here, you could search based on that criteria. So that way you don't use like the same preset with different artists. So again, in the full media bay, and you could access that by going to F5, come over, you could select a existing pad shop preset under VST sound, click on the settings, and under staff, you'll see artist, and then that could become an available attribute that you could enter in metadata for. And at that point, you could also use that for searching. All right, so we have Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island. Glad you can make it. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see also from Anteas, in preset filters, there are a dozen of info, but what are they for if we can't edit them? So you can definitely edit them, but you, again, just need to, make sure that it's selected as an attribute. So hopefully that'll make sense and work for what you want to do. All right, so we have Chris checking in from Munich. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and John Barry checking in from English Riviera. All right, so we see, so from Val Lu, I guess, just says, this question for today is there a fast way to switch between copy automation data when arranging blocks like on-off? So if you come over, so I think, let's come over here. So let's say maybe when we're copying, when you say blocks, maybe I'm assuming that this might be an event. So if you wanted to come here, let's say, okay, now as I have automation, let's say on this particular event. So if I copy that event, so let's say I hold down Alt or Option and drag, and if we don't want the automation, so if you just go to Edit, you could choose Automation Follows Events. And as we do that, if you disable that, so just from the Edit menu, let me know if that's what you want to do. So now if I want to copy the automation with the events or without, that you could just enable the automation follows the events from the Edit menu. So as we move an event or copy it, that the automation is automatically carried over with it. Let me know if that's what you want to do. So that way it could be kind of an on or off. And let me know if that's what the arranging blocks is, like the events on the project window. All right, so we've got yours. Says, thanks, Greg. You helped me with an aha moment answering my own question. I do have a number of master bus plugins that do oversampling, like standard clip, that playback, notes, and control, and then 2 times oversample, but render at 32. So, yeah. So that'll probably be it. All right, so we see from Patrick, Greg, while I change sound in Serum, I tend to move notes, octaves in key editor, all notes have been selected. But if I change sound in Serum, I should reselect all notes and control A every time. Any solutions? So I don't think, if, so I don't think that it's necessary to say, okay, while I'm in a particular event here, so let me just zoom. Okay, so you tend to move the notes and octaves in key editor. All notes have been switched, but if I change sound in Serum, I should reselect all the notes. So, there's no rule saying that you should or shouldn't. So, and if you wanted to, do this easily enough, if you control A and hold down to Shift and use the down and up arrows, you can move by octaves just like that. But but if you need to do it, I guess, if it makes sense musically for the part, then do it. But if you're changing it, like just, if you feel the need to, like if it doesn't sound right and sounds better an octave down, then knock it down an octave. But just because you change it up an octave on one sound doesn't mean that you have to start from the same spot. Okay, so we have a question from Roby. Hi, Greg. Thanks for streaming this great content. Please tell us the difference between modern and classic in Maximizer. Okay, so when we have the Maximizer plugin, one of the things that's always tricky when dealing with, different plugins could be that, we have to be very aware that when we, introduce new algorithms, that projects that had, previous incarnations of a particular plugin still need to be available for compatibility's sake. So we could think of classic as more of a typical maximizer. So in kind of the classic sense. And then modern is going to be designed more for kind of like EDM and kind of dance music production, which has kind of a different flavor for when doing maximizing. So you could just kind of listen to both examples on your particular project. So if I was doing something like maybe a rock project, I may choose classic. If I was doing more EDM type projects and maybe R&B, hip hop, I may choose modern as the algorithm, but it's just a rule of thumb. But it was one of those things, instead of introducing a new plugin, they'll just introduce kind of the same plugin capabilities with a different flavor button. So you could think of it as, maybe like Coke and Pepsi in one plugin. All right, so we see Uno Momento from Finland checking in. Seems like he's back to normal. All right, so Kanha Pratima Films, please tell us about channel latency. All right, so when we have the channel latency visible in our mix console, so I'll come over here and let's activate our channel latency. So the first thing we want to do is come over and we can see our channel latency settings. Now, anytime that we insert a plugin, we could think of this as like plugin tax, that anytime that we have a plugin that's inserted, all these plugins are going to cause, various forms of latency. So if I come and let's put on a multi-band compressor. So if we go to our dynamics, let's get to a multi-band compressor. that as we do this, we can see that the latency increases. So what this will allow you to do is just to see how much latency each of the plugin chains is causing. So, and then if you just kind of click, we could see, okay, the pitch correct plugin is 40 milliseconds of latency, and that's, you know, at this sample rate, 1,764 samples. The multi-band compressor is going to be set to 123 milliseconds of latency. So if I put this in live mode, now we could see that once we do this in live mode, that the latency is negated. So we could run it in, you know, live mode. So this way we could see on each channel how much latency is actually being imposed by the plugins. So, you know, some of the more heavy duty processing plugins may take more latency, and that's just more time to do the actual processing. So that's what the channel latency will show. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, and we have Bruce Bruton checking in from Simi Valley. Thanks for joining us again. So we see M. Sully is just asking if anyone is using a single curved display with Cubase. Any recommendations? So I know some friends that are running to Samsung, and they all tend to love it. All right, so we just see about the channel latency, and it just says channel latency is creating so many problems. You know, so anytime that you're running plugins, it's not, you know, Cubase is doing it. It's the plugin that's generally causing latency. And if you're running into situations where the latency makes it difficult to track and record because of the delay, that's why we have this little icon here in the lower left-hand corner of the transport, and that's a constrained delay compensation. And that will basically bypass plugins that are causing a lot of latency, and we could set a particular threshold under preferences. So if you find that the channel latency is too high as you record, you're playing virtual instruments, just simply come right here, and then you could bypass all the plugins without having to go into your mix console to do it. So, and think of it like a tax. You know, you want to run great sounding plugins. The great sounding plugins could have latency involved with them. So, you see, Born to Sing says, "Hi, Greg. We were really thankful for your guidance. Much appreciated. Thank you for the kind words. Wonderful to see Mark Winslow checking in from Hawaii. I'll be there at the very last day of the month in Maui on vacation." Okay, so I see from JK Studio about fader mix. So I don't see that. Let me see if it's coming up as... let me just look ahead, see if there's any... don't see... but yeah, maybe, so from JK Studio, I just see about fader mix. So let me know if you have, maybe you could expand your question. All right, so we see from Johnny Lizard, how to color more than one track at a time. Okay, so all we had to do is, let's say I have a number of tracks here, and I want these tracks to all be the same color. At this point, I'm going to select the channels. We'll go to our color tool option here, and then I could just grab my color tool, and then we could just select the particular colors for the tracks and make sure. And as you do this, unlike probably myself, make sure that you don't have an event selected anywhere. So if I wanted to, again, change the color for multiple tracks, just make sure that you have the track selected, not events, because the events will get colored otherwise. So, but again, if we select the tracks with no events, we could just go to our color palette and switch directly the colors on multiple tracks like so. All right, so we see Michael Pierce checking in from Chile, UK. Wishing that everyone is safe and well. It's great to have you on. All right, so we see from Lawrence Koch. He asks, Greg, how do I add a track to a lane of another track? I have two mics on a performer, and there were dropouts on one of the mics, and I want to comp the second mic onto the first track. Okay, so let's say I'll just do a quick. I'm gonna move this down so we have recordings here. We just set this audio track. Okay, so I'll do just a quick recording. And let me just arm the track, that would help. Okay, so let's say at this point I have my lanes, and then so I think we could just grab and I have this recording. So if I wanted to grab that and put it into a lane, now once we do that, it may automatically kind of just place it on top. And I think if we once we do that, right click on the lanes and say clean up lanes, that now we'll see our audio O2. So this is new recording, and at that point we could just do kind of our standard comp using our comp tool. So I could just say okay. So again, let me know if this will work for you. Just open up. So we have our recording here, and we want to drag it into the lanes. So at this point, I think we could even just drag it on top, and then right click in the lanes and choose to clean up lanes. And then you'll have your new recordings with all the other ones. So let me know if that will work for you, Lawrence. And we're glad you can make it on. All right, great to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, and we have Spike Williams checking in from Rhondda, Wales. All right, so we see from Patrick, is going back to his previous question. He says it's normal MIDI tracks, it's lead, synth, and I've layered, but it's mix and project. Like one layer is number 12, another is number 15. So I want to select all and move as one. Okay, so let me just come over here. Let's say, okay. Okay, so let's say if I was just doing just a quick recording on this, and I'll just put it into like a loop. Okay, so now if I wanted to kind of take all of these different elements, the one thing that you can do is so let's say if I right, so if we move this, we're going to move. So it looks like just moving it over, moved all the layers like that. Let me just jump up and reread the question. Now I know it's for MIDI. So, even though these are kind of all layers, they seem to move. We just... Okay, let me just see if we could... Seem like it just moved all for me. I guess you could also just open it up and select all the events and move like that. So let me know if that's helpful, Patrick. All right, let me just scroll back down. All right, great to see Capped Energy Music from Pennsylvania on. Thanks for joining us. And great to see Matt Elston on. See Michael Pierce saying yay for Apple F keys. Yeah, I like having my keyboard reassigned automatically for functions that I could be using for other things. All right, so we see Cubase X saying hi Greg, greetings, enjoying the live stream. Thanks, and thanks for being on. See Michael Pierce had snow. He's busy tracking dobro guitars. All right. See Capped Energy Music says, Greg, I hope you're doing great, man. So, yeah, life is good. I have no complaints. All right, so we see from Orly, just ask, which millisecond number do you recommend? So, it could really, depending on how much you want to move things. So if you wanted to, let's say our time frame here was set in seconds. And, now if I wanted to take this and nudge it, I could move it by 1 second. That's 1,000 milliseconds. Now, sometimes you may want to just, or if you wanted to move it in a smaller interval. So I'm just holding down the control key and the left and right arrows. Now I'm moving it by 100 milliseconds. If I wanted to move it an even smaller amount, I could do 10 milliseconds. Or, if we really wanted to go like just ever so slightly nudge, I could just, hold down and do 1 millisecond. So it really depends on, how much you need to move the part. So sometimes I know people will just do a lot of editing and nudge stuff by milliseconds, just to get like maybe different timings, or to take a track and maybe move it a little bit ahead so it hits the compressor at a different stage. So I know some people will do that. So there's no real right or wrong answer. It's just whatever value you need for doing nudging and other edits. Okay, so we see from alternative scores, like in the lower zone has tabs, but in separate window, I have pressing F3. Okay, so I guess maybe it's the tabs here. So let's say if we have our input tab. So let's say if we come over here, let's go to visibility to zones. So I think maybe this is with, okay, I want my stereo in to be on the left, and I want my my input output channels to always be fixed to the right. And now when we get to F3, so those zones can be independent, but I think we could also just sync the mix console. So those zones can be used independently for different mixers. So you may want to have different zones set up here, but once you set it up, you could have kind of the same zone configurations where your ins and outs could be fixed in your tracks, but it's designed to be where this could be independent. Each mix console view can have completely independent zone capabilities. Okay, so we see from Jay Hatchie, okay, he asks, I have a problem with audio files not snapping to the grid. If I zoom in all the way, I find tiny gaps at the end of loops, or they can overlap. To recreate this, load a one-shot kick to an audio track, and then make a 64-bit bar in the audio bounce that out as a loop to new track, and turn on musical mode and reset and set grid resolution to 16th, then click auto adjust and duplicate the file a few times and go right to the end and zoom all the way and see if there's a gap or overlap in a previous file where the two meet. All right, so let me get this set up. Let's do new project. Okay, so let me just okay, so I'm going to drag this to my project. Okay, so okay, load a one-shot kick to an audio. Okay, then make a 64 beat bar innuendo and bounce that. Okay, let me just load a one-shot kick to an audio track, and then make a 64 beat bar in audio and bounce that out as a loop to a new track. Okay, so let me say I just want to do this to 4 and a floor here. All right, so let's go ahead and duplicate. Okay, so I'm just going to grab my range selection tool here. Okay. Okay, so all right, just make sure this is all still playing back around measure 65. Okay, all right, so we created our 64 bars. Bounce that out as a loop to a new track. turn on musical mode. Okay, so I'm going to bounce this. Okay, so okay, so I'm going to do that to a new track. So I'm going to duplicate this track here. And now let's bounce selection. And we'll replace the events. Okay. All right, and we'll turn on musical mode. Okay, and we'll set the resolution to 16ths. All right, and then click Auto Adjust to duplicate the file a few times and go right to the end, zoom all the way, and see if there's any gap or overlap where the two files. Okay, so we'll duplicate. Okay, so now let's check our last file here. All right, I'm just going to play the first one and see now that we've okay, so let me just check kind of the okay, so I'm just going to take this off musical mode and see what happens to the file. All right, so now we have this in musical mode. Okay, and as we did this, I'm just going to all right, and now let's duplicate and we'll listen. So that seems like, but maybe when I'll just check the render length on this. I mean, that seems like it's playing on the grid, and you probably notice that let's just take a look at this particular file. So I'm going to render in place again, and I'll just check my range selection here. Okay, so let's see when I do my bounce selection, replace. All right, now let's see, we put it in musical mode. We'll see if the length changes there. And we'll see if they're so I may have just kind of gone a little bit over with my range selection, but it seems like that's working. Let me know if I'm doing something differently than UJ. Okay, so we see from Mike Weiser, says, any patch updates to fix macro crashing, experiencing freezing, then crashing after creating macro commands and moving them up and down the list happens after menu return. So I haven't run into any particular issues, and you probably on live streams I've created lots of macros, but I haven't really run into that particular any issues with that. So if I wanted to come, let's say, okay, we'll take this and say moving them up or down in the list happens after menu return. So let's say if I move up particular function, I'll just duplicate this first so I don't destroy my macro. Okay. So let's say if I move up and move down, and then let's say hit OK to get out, and let's go back to the macros. So it doesn't seem like this is causing any instabilities for me, but let me know if this is kind of what you're doing. So you said you move up and down, and it says happens after menu return. So I'm not sure if you're hitting like the enter or return key on your keyboard, but it doesn't seem to be happening. But let me know if I'm doing something differently than you, Mike. All right, so we see from Paresh Shah ask, hello, is there any 7.1 plugin by Cubase or Steinberg reverb compressor limiter? So basically all the VST3 plugins in Cubase, they dynamically adjust to whatever channel configuration you're in. So if you add a 5.1 track and you put a compressor on it, it's going to be, it's going to be basically the compressor on all 5.1 channels. So all of the plugins can do whatever scalability that you need to do. So basically all the plugins should scale to, so VST3, that's one of the good things with VST3 is that they can scale to whatever channel width is needed. Not all VST3 plugins do that. So, all right, so I see from Antias, it says when you want to save a new preset. So let me come over, and I think this was with the pad shop. So let's open up an instrument. So we'll come to pad shop. Okay, so now load this up. All right, so I'll make all my changes. All right, so let's say preset. All right, so we'll come here. So now if we click on this button here, we could just see all right, let's see if we could adjust the attribute inspector here. All right, and Let me just check. There's a way to set the attribute inspector. So it doesn't look like there's a way to change it here, but I'll do some research on it for Friday's live stream and see if there's a way of changing the values here, or what values show up. Let me just see if we go to let me just pop over here to my pool window, or not pool, but to the media bay. Just see if there's a way to. Yeah, so I don't see kind of a way of creating it right from that point, but I'll play around with it some more to see if we could add the attributes in there for artist. I guess you could always put it as part of the name, but I'll see if there's a way of doing it. And if you want to send me a brain cramp email reminder, you could just send it to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. Right, sorry, my chat field just jumped, so find my spot. All right, wonderful to see Pylon Records back. It says 2 questions. Is there a way to make the background in the note editor brighter? And when can we expect a full-blown auto sampler? So I think you could do a lot of auto sampling stuff inside of Hallion. But let's say if we wanted to go to our background. So let's say if we want our MIDI editor to have a brighter background, you go to Preferences and check out Event. Go to User Interface, and then I think if you go to Color Schemes, you can say Editor Area Background. You could just brighten it up so that as you go and do your MIDI editing, you could have kind of a whiter or lighter background. So again, come to Preferences and User Interface under Color Schemes, and then you could change the to lighter under Editor Area Background. So and now if we wanted to come here to Defaults, and then if you wanted to, so I'm not sure if auto sampling means like if you wanted to sample all sorts of, instruments very easily. So I think, you could have Hallion set up for that. Let's see if this is. All right, so let's say I'm here, and then if you just want to go to let's go to our little window setup, and this may have changed slightly in Hallian 7. I haven't tried this in Hallian 7 yet. Okay, so we go to our window and just say, okay, we want to do sample recorder and editor. And then really all we have to do is set up a side chain. Then we'll go to, let's say I have this. So, Hallian is kind of a unique thing in that it actually will sample. So at this point, we could say our input source, we wanted to, do our input, and we could side chain this particular input. So Hallian Sonic is going to be side chained into Hallian. And then I just want to have kind of MIDI information, and we could just say sample mode, we'll say auto next, and we want it to be MIDI note on, note off. And then as soon as I release the key, so this will capture the MIDI note and the velocity. And you could have a MIDI file that just plays back each note chromatically. At different velocity levels. All right, so let's say we sampled a number of notes of our roads here. Then we'll just go look at our particular sample. So when we say, okay, let's go to edit our different mapping. So we see all of our different samples. We could just have captured directly there, and we can see all of our audio files. So that again captures the MIDI note, the velocity. We could have different naming conventions as well. So, but it's wonderful to see you back on the live stream. You see Tupage 123 upgraded to Cubase Elements for $25 after the discount, so it's great. Okay, so we see Rob from Tarpon Springs. How do you sync the mix window with the project window? All right, so if we have a number of different tracks in the mix window, so let me just open up a particular project. Okay, so if we're hiding, let's say if we, just go to our visibility for a track, if we want it to have these kind of automatically sync, if you go to like the inspector, and we'll see this little almost two horizontal lines, and then you could choose to sync the project and the mix console. So now if we go to the visibility and we are hiding, that these are hidden within the mix console view as well. So we could just come over here and just this little icon, and then you could sync any of the four mix consoles directly to a particular to a particular mix console from like the channel settings. All right, so we see a question. What do you think is the best feature Cubase 12 has? So I think, for me, my favorite thing in 12, if I would just kind of pick a few, and there's, probably 150 new features. I really appreciate the kind of chord detection from audio, which I kind of use on projects where people send a project to me, and then they don't send a chords, or they don't know what chords they played, so I could just simply drag and drop the chords to the particular, like an audio track to chords and have a lead sheet basically generated for me. I like that. I like the scale correction in the very audio. The FX modulator, I think, is, if you're doing like, a lot of electronic music work is really powerful, but, obviously, for a lot of people, being able to utilize it without having a USB-E licenser, being M1 native is also a wonderful thing for the Mac community. So, but there's hundreds of great new features, and what's great to me, may go, may actually just see it as a particular, might not be as useful. All right, so you see from Val Lou says, yes, Greg, thank you. Just to put on a key command. So I think, if you wanted to put that on a particular key command, I think this might have been with the automation follows events. So let's say if I go to, my key commands. So just under the edit category, and you could assign the key command for the automation follows events. See, Chris just says he loves brand new Hallion 7, so. You see Captain Energy Music's also loving Hallion 7. All right, so we see from Bruce Bruton, says, I know you've covered this before, but I'm having trouble remembering. How do we get tracks to follow the tempo of the tempo track? Thanks and sorry for having to repeat. So no problem having to repeat. The whole goal is just to have you, for everyone to be able to, remember. So if you want to do it, basically, if you know what the tempo information of the track is, you can place the audio event into musical mode just by clicking here. Now, if you don't know what the tempo or the tempo is varying, at that point, you may have to do a tempo detection of a particular event. So let's say this is a track that's not following the tempo at all. Like we have no idea, and probably the tempo, because it's live musicians, is varying. So if I wanted to come here, let's go to tempo detection. We'll say analyze. I'm going to do a quick offbeat correction. And I'm going to figure out there's like probably a pickup. So right here, I want this to be my 4/4 bar. So now we figured out what the tempo is of the file. And if I want this to now embed all of these tempo changes into the audio file, we can go to audio, to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. And we can do this on a single file or multiple files. And that places it into musical mode. So now if I just wanted to get to my tempo and say it's playing back 120 perfectly, or 144, or 190, say 196. Or if you wanted to go back to the original tempo. So now if I wanted to take a loop and have that as an audio file, have a loop follow, let's go to my loops. Let's get to maybe drum loops here. And I'll just audition a loop that's at a completely different tempo. So I'm going to drag and drop this loop, and then once that loop, if I place it into musical mode, we'll see that that's going to automatically adapt to the grid. And as I drag it out, this loop is now speeding up and slowing down to match the extracted tempo from the event. Just change one preference here. So this loop, instead of playing back perfectly at 175, is speeding up and slowing down to match the tempo of the original file, which didn't have a steady tempo. Okay. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Most of the plugins don't have a reset button like Studio EQ, for example. How to reset such plugins? So usually the default parameters can be just set. So let's open up here. So let's say like we go to our Studio EQ. Okay. So if we come here, I could just hold down Control and click, and that will automatically return the parameters so just Control or Command plus click, and that will return the parameters to their default settings. So Control plus clicking on the parameters will reset the parameters to default state. Okay. We see Radha Krishna checking in from Chennai, India. Says he's enjoying his Cubase 12 Pro and gives thanks to Steinberg. So. Okay, so we see a question. My imported tracks are not lining up with the BPM of Cubase. How do I fix? So, you could just do a tempo detection of your particular tracks. So, but when you say imported tracks, are they imported from another project? Are they imported from like an MP3 or audio CD? Generally those aren't going to line up, and you'd have to do a tempo detection. If you're importing from a project, they may, depending on the project, they would play back at their original tempo, so it won't automatically place it into the project tempo unless it has a tempo and you've put it to musical mode. But if you could tell us if your imported tracks, where the tracks were coming from. All right, so we have Enzo Mag says how to change the colors for tracks. Okay, so if I wanted to take all these tracks and change the color of these, again, I could select the tracks, make sure that no events are selected. Now, if I select all my tracks and I have event selected and I go to the colors, you can see that the event changes and not the tracks. So now that I don't have any events selected, we could come over here and then we could change the color of the various tracks. So just select the tracks and then just go to either your color tool, and at this point, just change colors. All right, and there's a second part to this question. How does the CR channels works? So we have a control room, and what the control room will allow you to do is we can set this up in our audio connections, and we have control room. So we could think of the control room as kind of a separate monitoring path that's not necessarily tied to your particular It's not necessarily tied to the mix console or the gain structure of your mix. So many people will, as they're doing a mix, adjust their monitoring volume here. And then as you do this, let's say I take off my automation, and as we do this, we're always at the output level adjust. So maybe the gain structure is like too loud on the powered speakers, and when we export it, we're actually going to drop it down by minus 16 or minus 19.4 dB. So we don't want, so when we wanted to just have a monitoring volume, this is where the control room works. And again, we can set this up by going into our audio connections, and we add monitors. So now that I have my monitor path, I could just adjust the monitor level without affecting the gain structure in my master fader. And then we could also have different functions. So if I want to do down mix to mono, or if we wanted to have like an actual listen bus. So one of the things you could do is just come over here and say, okay, I want to click on the L button. So if we wanted to turn this on, you know, so we could at this point say, okay, I want to take the so I could have a dim level. So instead of like soloing the track that mutes everything, I could still hear stuff in context and just have like my piano higher. So those are a couple of things that you could do with the control room. So, and if you want to get into more extensive capabilities of doing headphone mixes for different musicians as well, that's also possible within the control room. All right, so a question from Jimmy Herrera. Can you talk about Quadrafuzz version 2 quickly, please? All right, so Quadrafuzz is kind of a monster distortion plugin. So we could think of it as not only just a distortion, but it's a multi-band distortion, but multiple levels of distortion. So as we're working on it here, so we look at our distortion. So let's say I wanted to have, you know, more tape saturation. So we could divide our frequency ranges. So if I wanted to just solo, and let's say I wanted to add more like tape drive. So we could add distortion in different frequency ranges. So I say, okay, I want this to be maybe more of a decimator on my high frequencies. So at this point, we could just take so there's kind of a decimator, or if we want just kind of straight distortion, or if I wanted tube distortion. So if you wanted to come and let's just say we want to do and we could also add different delays for each. So we say, okay, let's make our drum loop buzz. And usually you wouldn't do this on a full mix, but just for demonstration purposes. So at this point, again, we could, you know, have different noise gates, delays on each of the bands, and 5 different types of distortion that you could work with. So it's really like a phenomenal plugin for doing distortion on different, 5 different types of distortion on 4 different frequency ranges, and they could all be completely independent as well. All right, so we see from Mark, question, is there a way to also batch color channel selections in the mixer? In Cubase 9 you could do this. I don't think it's possible in 12. All right, so let's come over here. I'll select a number of channels. And so I don't think it was available in version 9 either, but let's... So let me just try it again. Let me activate Q-Link. I don't think that will make a difference, but yeah, so I think it's, but it's going to be one channel at a time in the mixer. But if you could also probably just go to your project logical editor, and now that those are selected, so let's say, okay, I just wanted to set color, set to fixed value. So I wanted to go to that color. So my selected channels can all go to different colors from the project logical editor. So if you wanted to do that as well, you could do it and save those as different presets. But I don't remember if 9 would remember to do that. I could check if you want, but it's also just kind of selecting your tracks here and going to colors, and then that will change it in the mixer. But if you're in the full screen mixer, is maybe just to use the project logical editor. So again, we could just come, okay. So that might be a good way to have it fire off. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely has to step away from the live stream for a little bit. Thanks for joining us. It's always great to have you on. Okay, so Roby asks, can you go through your preferences and tell us a few cool things there, like why you have things set up the way you do? Maybe some of us will find out things we missed to click. I generally use kind of the default preferences. So I am preparing a video, and hopefully I'm starting on it tomorrow, kind of going through what each of the preference settings allows you to do. So, and kind of what, their particular functions are. But, since there's probably, 1,000 different permutations and options that are available, once you start getting into all this, it could be a bit of a broad question, but so it's hard to go through everything that but I generally always start with stock preferences. That's just kind of how I work with it, but I will be kind of creating a separate video tutorial, kind of going through what all of the different preferences do. But if you have like a particular preference that, or something that you think might be handled by preference, I'm more than happy to answer. But, I could probably spend, a couple hours going through every preference. So it might be a little out of scope for the live stream. Okay. And now I see I pronounced his name wrong. It's Robbie. So thanks for letting me know. All right. Okay, so we see how to set up Talkback and how to use it. All right, so let's say we're recording musicians. Maybe we're in our control room and our musicians are in the tracking room. And what we want to do is to have a microphone that's going to be connected to an audio input on our audio interface. So, and then we'll go to our audio connections under control room. First thing we're going to do is to add a Talkback. And then from the Talkback mic, we want to basically define what input our Talkback mic is connected to. So when we have people that are set up under Q mixes, so let's say these musicians are listening to different mixes in their headphones. And we, instead of running out into the room saying, hey, we're going to record that again, what you could do is just simply go to the different Q mixes and we could say enable Talkback. So now that we have enabled Talkback, as soon as we hit the Talkback button, we could talk into a microphone that's connected into the audio interface, into the audio input that we defined here. And now the musicians would hear us, all the musicians that had, that had Talkback enabled. So let's say the drummer screwed up. And I don't want the drummer to hear me talk to the bass player. So let's say I want to tell the bass player, give the drummer a cue, for when that change comes in. So I'm going to turn off the drummer's ability. And I'm going to go to the bass player, make sure that I was like, hey, bass player, give the drummer like a head nod when the change part comes. Because the drummer keeps screwing it up. And, and the bass player is like, okay, got it. And we can hear them talking into like a room mic or whatever. And now we can say, hey, that was a really wonderful take, Mr. Drummer. Mr. Drummer, yeah, maybe if you like just, pay attention to that cue, maybe someone could give you like a little nod or something. So, we could just simply, once we have Talkback enabled, we could now have a microphone as a Talkback microphone in our control room so that we can communicate with musicians that are in the tracking room. All right, so we have a question. Hello, can you explain how to make more the 4 musicians for live band? So if you needed to create more than 4 Q mixes, one is you could take the output, realize that you have 4 Q mixes, and then you also have a Q mix that's going to be set up for, for the that's in the actual studio. So, we could switch between our 4 Q mixes here and then switch between what is in the studio. So we could use a studio mix as a 5th headphone mix. So that is a pretty typical scenario. So we could get 5. If you needed to feed other headphone outputs for Q mixes, at that point you could use, effect sends to feed these out to outputs that are connected to headphone outs, but it's not necessarily as unified as what we see here for the 4, where that's not necessarily going to feed the Talkback mic into those Q mixes for us. So we could think of having 4. So, if you have like, let's say, keyboards, maybe in the studio, keyboards could be monitoring off the main mix, and maybe the bass player could share with the guitar player on one Q mix if you need it. But, you could have like, bass, drums, keyboards, guitars, singer. So, and that's probably, and I realize that there's more instruments that are possible, but, so that's 4 distinct headphone, independent Q mixes. And then if you need it in a pinch, you could just come over and use either sends or direct outputs to create more than 4 if needed. Okay. Okay, so we see from Johnny Lizard, is there a way to upload a mix down on SoundCloud with title, artist, cover to? So you could just come over here. So you could just export, when you do export audio mix down, at this point, after export, you could choose to upload to SoundCloud. So it's not, it may not include, you know, the metadata for like, you know, pictures and images. But, you know, WaveLab would do that. But if you wanted to just simply come right here and just export and upload to SoundCloud. So try that. Okay. All right. So we see Backspin66 says, thank you for a great channel. Cheers from Sweden. You're welcome. I'm glad that it's helpful for people. All right, so we see from Enzo Mag says, question, all my loops and samples are missing, how to upload it to the media again. So make sure, you know, a lot of people just don't download the particular content that comes with it. So if you go to your Steinberg download assistant, we'll take a look at it here and we'll show you how you could get all of the content that you paid for. So one, let's say if we go to like our Cubase Pro 12, so make sure that you downloaded all of the content first. If you've downloaded all of the particular content, then what you need to do, and it's installed, is you could go to, there's a utility program called the Steinberg Library Manager, and here you could actually say, okay, here is all of my Cubase content. See if it's showing up here. So, and if you see it all there and it's still not showing up, go to Media Bay, and then you'll go to like VST Sound, and go to VST Sound and make sure that all of these are checked, and maybe just you could just say, okay, I want to take this and right click and rescan disks and make sure that all these are checked. But a lot of people don't download the content, or I'm missing all the content. You know, why is that? So usually when I get that question is that it wasn't actually downloaded. All right, so we see how to assign a MIDI keyboard with a MIDI track and lock it so that when you choose another track, it stays with the assigned track. Okay, so really all you have to do is on the, you know, so we have an all MIDI inputs. So if you only want, you know, let's say this particular MIDI port to be accessing it at that point, now, you know, this will only come in from this particular MIDI input port. And if you like, if you're doing a live situation, you could go to your studio setup and let's go to, see what's in here, your MIDI port setup, and then choose for that port not to be in all MIDI inputs. And then it's only going to be locked to that particular channel. You know, unless you have defined the MIDI input port to another device. So instead of using in all MIDI inputs, just use the dedicated MIDI input port for that particular channel. All right, so we see all right, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so we see best stock plugins for mixing and mastering. So really, any of the plugins are very high quality. So I think that, a lot of people, I think, would, tell you that as they start, working with the internal plugins, that they tend not to, over time, for kind of general purpose and for, their mixing purposes, that they're able to, pretty much use all of the different stock plugins, so if you wanted to, like for reverbs, you have very high quality, reverence, convolution, revelation is going to be algorithmic. If you wanted to have different dynamics, we could have stuff like Razor, which is, like an incredibly powerful kind of, up down limiter. And you have a number of multi-band, but, pretty much I would try, to see if you really need to go beyond the stock plugins in just about any function. So if you wanted to go on for EQ, it's really hard to beat the frequency EQ plugin, where you could have 8 bands, and they could be, mid, side, left, right, with independent settings, and it's a dynamic EQ. So, just about any kind of specialty plugin. Like every time I do kind of a particular demonstration on plugins, generally people are like, oh, now I don't need to, why do I waste all this money buying these other plugins when you could just kind of use the internal tools inside of Cubase. Okay. All right, so we have Noah saying hi to everyone. All right, so Johnny Lizard just asked how to renderize an instrument track as an audio track. So really all you have to do is just come over here. So probably what renderizer is just a render in place. So you can go to your render settings, choose for it to be dry with channel settings, complete signal path. So this would be inserts and EQs and channel strips. This would include sends. This would include the master effects as well. So just use the edit and go to render in place. Okay, so Noah asked, in Scale Assistant, is there a way to create a new scale that doesn't exist in the list, and how to use that scale on some random notes to create a coherent tune with a new scale? Thank you. So yeah, so let's take a look at all right, so let's come over here. Let's say as we're looking at our piano part, and we'll come over. Let me just take this. We'll go to our scale assistant. All right, so when we see our editor scale, at this point, we'll see major, scroll down, and then you could set up your own musical scale. So let's say you want to do, an augmented Bartok scale. You could just create a new scale and then define kind of the intervallic relationships and give it a name and use that as the basis for editing. So right where we see our editor scale, where you see major, just click, scroll down, and then again, you can set up your own musical scales and create new scales. So just click on Add Scale, and then you'll be all set. All right, so we see Nick has popped on to hit the whack the like button, even though he has a swollen face with an abscess. So we hope you recover well. We appreciate you coming in, and thank you for your video that you sent about Club Cubase. All right, so we see just a question. Can you show some of or all of the benefits of using libraries in Cubase 12 Pro? All right, so when we kind of work with libraries, and we could think of a library, when we have a project, we could see that we have an audio pool. And this pool may be set up for, and this is all of the audio files that are needed in a particular project. So many times, if I was doing like two good uses of libraries. So a library is basically a pool that is not tied or associated with a particular project. So it is an audio pool that is independent. So two kind of, work two use case scenarios for libraries. One is, let's say you're a composer. So composers will often spend a lot of time coming up with different sounds. Okay, like I'm going to do a whole sound design phase where I want to use particular sounds, and these are going to be unique to this particular project. So they do a lot of sound design and just different elements and different sound effects, and they create, all sorts of a sound identity for a particular show or for a particular movie. Now, let's say you created a sound identity for a science fiction show. My friend Fred Corey is doing The Ark on Sci-Fi, which is in the U.S. now. It's like the big hit new sci-fi show. All right, so if I needed, let's say, all of a sudden season 2 gets the green light, and you're like, okay, I need to use the same sounds that I used for season 1, and let's say the post-production staff says, okay, those are great sounds, pull them up, but you didn't want to necessarily open the project. We could save a library of all the different audio files used, all the different sound design elements that were used in that project, and then I could open it up as a library. So say if we go to open library, I think I saved one here. So now I could have all of the kind of, the sound design for a particular film that's used, and I could just drag and drop when I need to access, we're reminiscing back to this character. This is this character's sound. So when that character comes in, I'm just going to take the sound that I saved in a library from season 1 of all of my sound effects and just drag and drop it right into when I need to access and recall that particular sound. Now, we also see libraries used for doing like radio spots or TV production. So let's say, you're doing you have a show that's coming up. So often you'll have promos that run for the show. It was like coming next month, and then this show. And then you have the announcer that was recorded on Sunday night, coming in next week, coming in 3 days, coming in 4 days, coming in 1 day, coming tomorrow, tonight, so instead of having to record that announcer saying tonight, coming tomorrow, coming next week, over and over again, we could have all of those different sound design, whether it's even like a corporate, ID tag, like let's say the little Intel sound that's on every commercial when they have like a little sonic identification tag. All of those could be saved in a particular library so that you could pull those particular sounds out at any time without necessarily having to organize different, folders and all that, so when you have like different advertising clients and you wanted to access particular sounds, save it as a library, and then that way that collection of sounds, wherever they are on your hard disk, can be just accessed. And, once you have a project set up with all of your sound design elements, whether it's for, television, radio production, or film production, just come over and you want to just simply, export the library, or you want to, save the library. And, and at that point, you could just call up all those collections of sounds very quickly. All right, so we see Jeweler the Rocket on, so thanks for joining. All right, and great to see Michael Teams on the live stream. Okay, reading through. All right. All right, still reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, and we see HSO without the USB dongle. When is it? So if you, I know it's working under the Absolute 6. I'm not sure if it's already. But I know that there's some more libraries coming probably towards the end of this month. They'll be on the new licensing, but it is working under, under like a Dorco license or under the Absolute. And I think that there are some more coming around the end of the month. So that might be, if it's not already on the Steinberg licensing, it might be coming around then. All right, so we see on a different note, is it possible to hover the mouse over the different views and have it auto-select that instead of having to click on it? So, like, I guess if you're in the different zones, hovering, so if I'm, I think it makes sense to click on it, but you could still, so I'm not sure what the benefit of hovering is, I guess, because generally once you want to do something in a particular zone, you would, you could see the zones, but, if you wanted to take action in a zone, you would have to select an element in the zone to take an action. But if you wanted to just hit the tab key with the different zones, you can navigate without having to use the mouse. So I could still hover over here and have different, so whenever you click to take an action, that will make that the area of focus. So, but let me know if there's a particular thing that you want to be able to activate that, or what the, what you wanted to access without actually selecting something to do, without like a particular action. All right, so we see a question from Frido. How do I map an external electronic MIDI drum set like the Roland TD1 all over Cubase? So not only in Groove Agent, but for all plugins I use. So any of the different, it's going to spit out MIDI data. So if we were inside a Groove Agent and you wanted it to map to Groove Agent, what you need to do is, if you just go to this lower corner right here below the corner pad, you'll see you'll see map for hardware controllers, and I think you would just say eDrum controller here. So you could do that. Now each plugin may respond to different MIDI notes, but most of the plugins will have kind of like an electronic drum set mapping. Turn this on for a Roland kit, turn it on for a Yamaha kit, or a Simmons, or an Alesis kit, etc. One other thing that you could do is save different drum maps. So let's say I'm here and we're looking in the drum map. So within the drum map, we could have I notes and O notes. So we could actually say, okay, this kick drum, instead of playing a C1, is playing a B1, and then we can say, okay, take B1 or C1 and change it to an output note on a different source. So we could take an incoming MIDI note and automatically transpose it to play a different sound within the drum editor. So once you have a drum map assigned, we could then at this point remap the incoming MIDI note to the outgoing MIDI note of where we want the sound to come from. But you could do that kind of internally, inside. Most of the time you need to do it within the particular plugin, but you could also do it globally directly here within like the MIDI drum editor as well. Okay, so we have a question. Can I change to drum editor if I'm already in the key editor in an extra window, not in the lower zone? So let's say if I'm taking a look at this part, let's say I'm in my key editor. All you have to do is just go to your MIDI menu and say open drum editor. So same data, just a different representation. So again, just go to your MIDI editor, and if you have a keyboard shortcut assigned to your drum editor, you could just kind of switch back and forth. So if you want to see in a list editor, a drum editor, score editor, you could just kind of come back and switch. So just go to your MIDI menu and you could switch the editors just like that. All right, so we see how to get a perfect master in Cubase. What is a perfect master? So, we could regulate the levels. So if you wanted to, let's say if we did a mix down of your project, so let's say if I want to take like just a short portion of this song and do an audio, let's do a quick export audio mix down. So let's do a stereo out and we'll create an audio track. And I'll just do a quick export here. So, I don't know what a perfect master is. Every song is going to be different, but if you wanted to make sure that you were at particular loudness levels, so this is our mix down project here. So let's say, okay, I'm looking at the levels. I can go to my audio to statistics, do an analysis. So let's say, okay, we're at minus 12.5. For my loudness, I'm at, my like minus 12.4. So if I wanted to set this to a particular loudness level, what I could do is go to my audio to processes, and then normalize and say, okay, I want this to be minus 14 LUFS. And now that will automatically process and get it to kind of different, particular levels that can be optimized for different streaming services. So, but whether it's balanced in, having the, correct amount of, balance between low frequencies, mid-range, and high frequencies, that's just going to be subjective. And, so Cubase won't necessarily do that for you. All right, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Okay, so Robbie asks, I also saw your video in supervision sidechaining. Can you go a bit deeper into trying to make duet vocals equally loud using this technique? You could. So, yeah. So let's say, let me just open up a project that has some harmonies in it, perhaps. All right, let me find this. find a file I'm looking for. This one. Okay, so let's say I want to take this harmony. So let's say I have like two different harmony parts. All right, so one way is to, if you wanted to just, normalize the tracks, you could do that. But if you wanted to get a sense of the two tracks, let's go to our inserts and let's put our supervision on. All right, so we'll say we're going to do a level here. Okay, so let's go to sidechain and let's say harmony 3. Okay. I think if we go to our VU meter. All right, let me just check. Let me just activate the sidechain and say, okay, so now we can see monobus and sidechain together. So you could kind of set it up like that. So if you wanted to see what the sidechain input. Let me make sure I have it right. All right, so now we can come over here and look at both of them together. So you could use that to kind of get a sense of. So, and now let's say if we wanted to just jump back, we'll just put this at a normal VU. So if you wanted to do this, so again, what we could do is take supervision, put it on one track, sidechain this another channel into it, and then we could look at the monobus and main sidechain level. So we can say, okay, this is our main track, and this is our sidechain, and then we could overlay both of them together. And then you could compare levels like that. All right, so we see suggestion box. It would be a nice feature to import audio to have it detect tempo, set definition, and put it in musical mode as a preference to happen all at once. EDM and hip hop would love this. Yeah, but it could be like if you're dragging a file in, if the tempo isn't determined, when people expect kind of a drag and drop environment to then have it do the calculations, people probably wouldn't like that. But it's easy enough to kind of do, but you don't want it in all situations. So it could be good for hip hop But if you're doing like a rock thing, you may not want that at all. If you're doing composition, like for film or media, then you may not want that at all. So it's always difficult to balance, everyone's workflow and kind of design intentions as well. So. Okay, so we see from Michael Teams, question, howdy Greg, I've lost how to use the range tool. Was trying to tweak 3 tracks of vocal, but ended up doing them one at a time. Please refresh us on this. All right, so let's say we have a number of vocal tracks here. And if we want to do like a range tool, so I'm just going to select it. And then I could just take this particular range across multiple tracks and copy it if I wanted to move it, or hold down the Alt or Option key to make a copy. So again, just kind of select, and you can have a combined like selection tool and range tool. So if you're at the bottom, it's a selection tool, or if you're at top, it's the combination tool. And now we could move or copy the selected range like so. Let me know if that's helpful for you, Michael. See, that got yours. Forgot about quadrifuzz. So yeah. And Jazz Dude just says in our free plugin, which would be an easy $49. It's a third-party plugin. So that's a good point. All right, so I just see from Chill Will, I updated to Ventura. How I get back? So if you want to get back to like a previous operating system, you could probably have to use like a time machine. Sometimes Apple isn't so good at allowing you to jump back operating systems, but you could check with Apple if you just want to get back to a previous operating system. But see if you have a time machine backup. So you got yours. Just says used to use quadrifuzz on 808 and basses, and he needs to start using it again. And Michael Pierce says he used it today extensively. It's great. See, Fetus Belt says quadrifuzz is a Saturn II killer. So, Bright Quadrifuzz has been around for a lot longer. See, Fetus Belt says lots of talk in Nashville. 10 years from now, Pro Tools won't be a requirement to know anymore. It's going to be Cubase. So there's lots of people doing lots of stuff in Cubase in the window, doing phenomenal work in Nashville. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on. Glad you could join us today. Right, my chat field just jumped, so let me just... All right. So we see a question from Sable. How to generate rough arrangements, sheet music from either Mixdown, MP3, Wave, or Projects tracks. So if you wanted to take, let's say a particular project here. So let's say I'll just jump into, let's do a different project here. So I'll just say... All right, so if I wanted to do, so there isn't anything that's going to break apart kind of all the different instruments from like a mixed file effectively. If you're doing like something as a chord chart, what I would do is I'm going to create a empty instrument or MIDI track. So just not assign it to anything. And let's say I want this to be like roughly the length of the project. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take this guitar part in this project.
You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you caught me too.
So I could take this vocal here, and let's say if we go into Very Audio. All right, so just go to Very Audio and okay, and then we'll go to Functions and say we want to extract MIDI. All right, so now we have kind of our melody, and we may have to clean it up, just kind of realize. But now I'm going to take the guitar part, and I'm just going to drag it up. Okay, so once we do this, it's going to figure out the chords for us. Okay, so let's come over here and realize that I would have to, let's say we'll change our project key here. It's probably going to be more. Okay, so let's say if we do, all right, so let's say if we have this and I want it, so that's, let's say our melody, I'm going to look at it into page mode. So we'll just look at it, go to our scores menu, switch it to page mode. And now at this point, we'll go to scores, to advanced layout, and say show chord track. And then you could have just a quick chord track setting right there. And you could do kind of a quick lead sheet. And if you want to give it more space, let me see if I remember then you could just kind of do a quick lead sheet like that if you wanted to. So try using Very Audio to take the melody and convert that, and then do and then drag a MIDI part or the chords. So, and this is if you have the melody recorded separately. If not, you may have to sing along with it or play it on keyboard to get the melody in MIDI. But you could just kind of do it just right here. And let's say if I want to set the key for the particular song. So if we're in A, so in just a matter of a couple minutes, you could do a quick lead sheet, kind of like that. But if you needed a handoff for like chord charts for musicians, that's an easy way of doing it. It's just dragging the piano part up and be able, or the guitar part, piano part, or the full mix down file, and be able to generate the chord charts for musicians. All right, so we have a soup recipe from Michael Pierce, long-awaited soup recipes. So is 2 large white onions, oil, sweet them. So for about 15 minutes, probably going to be 25 to 33 cloves of smoked garlic just went in. So he's actually making his soup live now. All right. All right, Michael Teams wants to know if people have listened to the new Cartoon Character Assassin CD. I didn't get a chance to do it over the weekend, but I'll do it tonight when I'm working on the index for the live stream. Thanks for the reminder. Congratulations on the release on Saturday. All right, so we see from Johnny Lizard, I can't find the upload to SoundCloud in my export window. So if it's going to be, look under the post process, if it's there. So it might be like in, I'm not sure if it's in all versions of Cubase, but under after export, just upload to SoundCloud. So see if it's there. All right, wonderful to see Jeff Zabelski on from Chico, California. Michael Teams is reminding people to smash the like button. So we see, is possible in frequency to hold the peak permanent? So I don't think so, because it's actually showing the particular, EQ frequencies. So if it's on the display of frequencies, so let me just jump here quickly. So I don't know if it's like, the playback frequencies, but that's kind of showing, what frequencies are actually going on in the plugin. But I think if we go to like the, let's say if we go to supervision, that if we are here, let's look at our, let's say our spectral domain, let's say our spectrum bar.
You look my way and your heart shone through.
So you could pause measurements directly inside of like supervision.
Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long
So even if we wanted to add,
I remember the day that we
so as soon as we come here, we could just, I think if you hold down Alt or Option,
our first kiss.
you could freeze all of the meters at a particular point.
After that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy to call my.
So if you want to do that, maybe supervision would be a better choice. It's kind of purpose built for that. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher on the live stream. Glad you can make it today. All right, so Michael Pierce has added 4 sticks of celery in at 15 minutes. All right. Just captivating to see how Michael Pierce's soup turns out. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, says create channel to join the chat. Never had this issue like this on phone or MacBook. Now on Win 10, stuck on a pop-up to create channel to join the chat. Sheesh. So doesn't seem like, yeah, maybe it depends on your YouTube account or that you're logging in on, but it doesn't seem like you should have to have an account. Okay, so Ray O'Brien asks, is it possible to quantize a track after you've applied set tempo from audio definition? So yeah, once you do that, let's go ahead and see if we still have the project open. All right, so here we've done the set definition from tempo. So let me just activate this project. So let's try to see. I think you should be able to, but let's come over here and let's make sure audio warp is on. We'll zoom in and quantize. So let's see if we need to Take it out of musical mode. Maybe let's just see. Yeah, so you may have to take it out of musical mode, but try that. But we just quantized it after applying that. So it looks like you shouldn't have any problems. All right. Robert Higgins asks, "Hi, Greg. I forgot what plugin was used for making a voice turn into 4 voices, like a doubler, but with 4 voices." So it's probably the Cloner plugin, which is found, I think, under modulation. So let's put it on this one, since we're just listening to it and have kind of a bit of context reference from it. So.
There was no regret right after that Garth Brooks show. You told your daddy and he called my mom, said you were too damn
let me just
good
adjust
for any boy
mix.
that dumb. His soured words are now dead and done. That was a long, long time ago. Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time.
Let's go ahead and turn it on now.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to. Well, leaving now, I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So, yeah, probably the Cloner plugin. So it's a great plugin to use for that, especially like background vocals as well. All right. You see, what plugin do you have to sound more like auto-tune? So if you wanted to do kind of graphic editing, we could use the Very Audio. But if you wanted to do like if you want it kind of like
that was a long, long time ago,
like a typical processed kind of robotic sound that people often use, go to your pitch correct and go to under pitch shift, and you could adjust the speed kind of.
You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to. Well, leaving now, I'm so in love with you.
So if you want kind of more of the mechanic robotic effect sound, just do pitch correct and you could adjust the correction speed and tolerance.
Oh, I remember the day that we wed. Seems like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right.
So if you want that kind of process sound, you could get that. So try the pitch correct plugin under pitch shift category. All right, so we have a question. How can we edit a tempo track mid-project and not have it affect audio events to the right of the edited section, especially when the new warp marker tools in project? Okay, so let's say we just come over here and we'll change tempo. Just go to a different project here, sorry. opening up the... All right, so say we're at 100 beats a minute. Okay, so it says how can you do edits tempo and not have it affect the audio events to the right. So let's say we jump to, and let's say we have our tempo track. So right now we're at 100 beats a minute, and all right, so if the audio tracks themselves are not in musical mode, then as we play, and as I draw in tempo changes, then they will play back at the same tempo. It's only when they're all in musical mode. So I could have whatever kind of tempo I want, and we may see it kind of change shape. That's because the amount of time is changing, but the audio is playing back at the same speed. So all you need to do is change tempo. If you want the audio to continue to play, just don't have it in musical mode. And then it's not going to dynamically change based upon the tempo. So if it's not in musical mode, it's not going to follow tempo changes. Okay, so we see from Got Yours, as most pros I know hardly ever use a lower zone for anything. You can set up preferences when you double click to open to a full window. Stupid lower zone is a waste of space. Well, there's a lot of people, I know lots of pros that use the lower zone to always have the mixer available for tweaking. So lots of people use it, especially, people are running on laptops, portable use. So I think it works pretty well, but you could obviously not work with it if you don't want to. All right, so Ziggy Edison asks this question, are the libraries only audio samples? So it's going to be audio files. So that's what the pool or the library is actually storing. So. Okay, so we have Real 773 checking in from Chi-Town. So miss going to Chicago. Used to go there every other month. And every month at least on layovers. Okay, so we see, can the synth settings be saved to a DAW yet with the MIDI track? So yeah, you can save it to a MIDI track, but realize that you may have to do a sysx dump in it if your instrument is capable of doing that. So you may have to record the information. So if it's an external synth, so you could definitely do it and just record a sysx dump, and all you have to do is just come to your preferences and just go to MIDI filter, and then you may have to uncheck sysx because that's filtered off by default. But you could do a sysx dump from your instrument and all the settings will be recalled, and you just simply record it as a MIDI track. And if you're doing it for virtual instruments, all you have to do is save the project, and any adjustment that you've made in a virtual instrument will be saved in the project. But if it's an external synth, so any instrument that you load up in a project, once you have the instrument set up, if I come here and I save the project, all the parameters of the VST instruments will automatically be recalled. Okay, so we see from Frito, thank you for the patient answer so far. How did you lock that a certain event or track is going to always open in a drum editor and always open in a key editor by default? So if the drum track, if a track is routed to a drum map. So let's say if I have this set to a drum map, when I double click, it's going to go into a MIDI drum editor by default. And if it's not set to a drum map, so say no drum map, when I double click on it, it'll go into the MIDI key editor. And that's going to be a preference where we could come to under editors, we could say default MIDI editor, we could say open key editor, and then use drum editor when a drum map is assigned. So if that's checked, and if there's a drum map on the particular instrument, that will automatically launch the drum editor for you when you double click. Okay, so we see from Ziggy Edison, can you imagine Halion 7 settings being saved to a meta track together with the MIDI track? So, just within the Cubase project itself, all of the settings for the instrument, will be recalled as well. So you don't need any special metadata for that. It's just part of the actual project file. Okay, so we see from Abraham Raj, on the older Cubase, when I add a track, it will have my default settings such as send effects and so on. But now the send is empty, but others like the EQs inserts are there. Is there any way I can... okay, so this could be contingent on a preference. So let's say if I'm doing a new track, so when, the EQs... and inserts can be, and channel strip are available on every single track by default. So channel strip and EQ. So let's say if I'm here and I add an audio track, okay, and then on this audio track I add a send. So let's come over here. Let's have it go to cloner. Okay, so I think if we come over here to preferences. Maybe under, let me see. Okay, so under VST, you'll see this activate. No, it's not the one I was thinking of. Okay, and we'll see this function here, connect sends automatically for each newly created channel. So I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so I have my cloner there. Let me add a couple audio tracks here. So now as soon as I come here, we see that I have my cloner, and then when I go to the newly created audio tracks, that the effect send is already routed to the same slot, and all we have to do is activate it. So again, go to preferences, to VST, and connect sends automatically for each newly created channel. Okay, sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so you see question. Hey, is there any way to add swing to the click track? Like I'm presently working on a project in 3/4 and time signature, almost like waltz, but the click track just doesn't give me that feel. All right, so let's say we're in 3/4. So let me just come over here. I'll add a signature track. All right, so let's say as we play, I'll just turn on my click. I mean, so generally the metronome should be on the beat. But let's say if we wanted to, if you want it to be more inspired, some people use drum loops for that. But what else you could do is, let's say, let's get to your signature track. So a lot of times when you add swing isn't going to be necessarily on a beat, but the note's kind of in between the beats. So I'm going to go to my signature track here. Something you could try is just say render MIDI click between locators. Okay, and then we could route this to any device, but let's say at this point I wanted to apply, and I'm just going to, let me just add a quick instrument to route this to. Okay, so let's say, so if we wanted to apply kind of like, a quantize, like a swing on this. So again, generally the quantize is going to be not necessarily on the beats, but so if I wanted to say, okay, let's come over here and I wanted this to be quarter notes and let's apply our swing percentage. So once you kind of take the signature track, go to your project menu, and then you could say under signature track, render MIDI click between left and right locators, and then you could adjust kind of your swing. Let's say we'll do. So instead of having a click track do that, you could just do it in MIDI and quantize the MIDI data, which would be the click. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. All right, so we see Ziggy Edison says, will MIDI 2.0 enable this? So if it's recall from, so all the parameters for VST instruments can automatically be recalled as part of the Cubase project by default. So MIDI 2.0 has capabilities to do that. That part of the MIDI spec isn't complete and no hardware is supporting it. So I think that there's a lot of stuff already kind of done on the Steinberg end, but it gets to be kind of a chicken and egg scenario where, we're waiting for the hardware to catch up with all the great things that MIDI 2.0 can actually do. Okay. Okay, so we see from John Barry's suggestion, how about input and output trim for VST plugins with auto gain matching a bonus? So I think that most plugins that do alter the gain do have adjustments, but realize that most people that are, incorporating and using a plugin that can alter the gain are wanting to intentionally alter the gain. stage as well of the particular plugin. So that's why a lot of times, if we go to like, let's say on our EQ, and if we wanted to go to a particular EQ plugin or compressor plugin, so let's say if we go to like our standard compressor, that at this point, as soon as we come over here, you could always have, makeup gain. So a lot of plugins will kind of do that for you automatically, but, plugins that often can increase or decrease gain will allow you to adjust the gain manually to compensate when needed. But, a lot of people, use those plugins to get louder or softer specifically. So, but I understand your point, and I'll pass it along nonetheless as perhaps an option. Okay, and I just see kind of further discussion about the click track. So if we wanted to use kind of our normal click, so, and if we go to our signature track and we double click here, so, we could set our click pattern, so if you wanted it all to be the same, I just see, I edited the click sounds, velocity, and all. I was wondering if we could get that 1 ta-ta, 2 ta-ta feel to the click. So again, when you come here, you could just say, and if I wanted to, edit the pattern, we could say double tempo. So say if I want to, or if you want to do, or default, or if you wanted to. So there's all sorts of different click patterns you could do just using kind of the click pattern editor. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. All right, so we see from Enzo Mag, thank you, Greg. All my loops are back, so that's great. Now you have to do projects using them. All right, a question from Jeweler the Rocket. Is dithering used only when downgrading the bit rate to a CD quality? No, so it's down, because you realize that anytime you're doing processing inside of Cubase, it's at 32 or 64-bit floating point. So if you're rendering a 24-bit file, that you would still benefit from using dithering. So it's not just for CD resolution. All right, so we see from a question from Dave Christie, is there a way to select a new track within the lower editor window without selecting the lower window editor? So currently, like as we're doing this, let me just jump to so if I have multiple, so we could think of this as whatever the selection is. So let's say if I'm looking at my sample editor, and let me just say we're not in Very Audio. So if I have multiple parts selected here.
Yellow coach to ferry us home. You look
So if I wanted to now look at the vocal part, we could just, so if you have multiple events selected, you could just click here, whether it's MIDI or audio.
Well, even now I'm so in love with you.
But this is really kind of showing what is selected. So again, if you have, multiple events selected here. So let's say, okay, I want to take all these parts.
Waiting on our yellow coach.
And now I just wanted to go to,
You look my way and your heart shone through.
see my bass part. And if I didn't want to see the others, I could just
Me too.
see like particular background vocal recordings.
Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So kind of whatever you have selected, you can just switch back and forth between them, whether it's audio or MIDI. All right, wonderful to see Mandy Lane on the live stream. Great to see you back. Thanks for joining us today. See, Robbie says, Greg, thank you for everything you showed me. I hope you're having a fun day. So yeah, it's been a fun live stream so far. But now I'd spend 4 hours after getting a quick dinner break and catching up with my son and wife, how their day were, and then watch it again and do all the indexing. So. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, Endorco 3.5 elements, input note on same piano staff, 3/4, 3/4 measure, all eighth notes, and then input a half note on same measure, turns into 4 tied eighth notes. Can you help explain voices on one staff? All right, so let's see if we can do this real quick. So I don't have 3.5, I don't think, but here, we'll just go to. See comment from Mandy Lane, Waves needs to make a new spectrum analyzer, so maybe just use Supervision instead. All right, so let's go over here and okay, so let me just change to 3/4. Okay, so let me just go ahead and put some notes in here. So you said you started off with all right, so we're going to have 2 eighth notes. Okay, so all eighth notes, and then, okay, so let's say, okay, so we want all eighth notes. Okay, so let's say we want put in, okay, and okay, so let's say at this point we want to put a new voice in. So I think you hit, was it Shift V? Or but there is like I'm trying to remember the new voice command. So I think we go. All right, so I hit Shift V, and then let's say I want to put in a half note of D. So then if we wanted to, so, and then I just hit Shift V again, and then so that way we could have one voice that's kind of going as eighth notes and another voice that's a half note. So, so move the caret back and then hit Shift V, and then you could enter new voices in just like that, Jeff. All right, just see more comment. People want it where everything kind of automatically fits together for workflow, like with Got Your. So it seems to work well for like Ian Kirkpatrick and Circuit and Zed and amongst other people. All right, so we have Project checking in from Scotland. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see, I guess it's RCal773. We can go get some deep dish next time you're in Chai. So, yeah, I used to go to Gino's East, is where I used to go when I was in Chicago. All right, Robert Higgins asks, if I want to install Howley in 7, do I have to uninstall previous version or does it overwrite? So it just overwrites, and so you don't have to uninstall it at all. So no problems there. All right, so we see I'm coming from Pro Tools. Is there any way to get up to speed quickly? So, ask questions in the live stream. I think that Dom Segalis did a great video on like how to get started in Cubase in 14 minutes. So that might be something to check out as well. But if you have like particular questions, just let us know. Anything we could do to kind of help you transition over to Cubase. And we're here every Tuesday and Friday. So. All right, so we see from John Barry, hi Greg, there's some discussion here about importing audio and getting it tempo matched. Could you show how easy it is? Okay. All right, so, depending on your genre, you may have audio that has just a steady tempo and audio that doesn't. So let's say I'll take two audio files that I want to do like a quick remix of. So something that doesn't have a steady tempo. And let me just find. Okay, so let's say I want to take this file that doesn't have a steady tempo. Okay, and I want to do a remix of it, whatever you want to do. So, and it's easier if you don't know what kind of if the tempo is all the same. So say I want to take this file here. So we'll go to project, say tempo detection. All right, so I think we have a little intro. So we'll put our downbeat, I think is right here. All right, so now I want to add drum loop. So now I want to take this particular drum loop and I'm just going to drag it over. And now we place that drum loop. Before I drag it over, we'll place this into musical mode. Sorry, my cat is coming for me. Probably wants me to feed him, so I may have to. So now that I have that loop into musical mode, we're going to just play it. So now that loop is automatically just following. So, and that's really kind of all you have to do to get different audio to match. I'm going to let my cat out. Bear with me just for a second. He's going to scratch me because he's hungry. Hang on. All right. All right. So we see, can I find sample songs in Cubase and make my own? So if you're looking for like a download project to work with, you could come over to, there are a couple of tutorial projects that you could download. So if you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, so you could obviously make your own projects. So, but there are a couple of tutorials that you could download from here. So let's say you go to your Cubase Pro and scroll all the way down. And then there's projects, 2 projects here that you could download. They're quite good, so you could kind of hear that. See, it's raining in Northern California, and Jeff Sabelski's had 2 symphony concert rehearsals canceled already. So, all right. So we see, hi Greg, thank you. I enjoy your channel lots. I noticed that your chat jumps a lot for you. Maybe just jot down the time slot you're up to, or if your phone can view the same chat. Be stable. So I use a kind of a different laptop for it, but only so many, because as so many comments are added, sometimes it will refresh itself. So that's why I had to kind of jump back. So. All right. So we see, can I use automation pitch bend for audio track? So yeah, you could, there's a couple of ways of approaching this. So let's say if I wanted to take this track here, so let's say we're kind of starting at, so if I wanted to take a region of this particular audio file, I could just come over to audio and let's go to processing. And then we have pitch shift. So we could just come here to pitch shift and say, okay, I want to go to my envelope. We can set our range. So now as we listen to this, we'll just hear. So if I wanted to change the pitch bend amount here, so we can see it's going to go down, then up. And it's going to rise slightly and go back down. Now, if I wanted to just use my pitch bend wheel on my controller, I just would go to my sampler control. And let's remove that process first. I'll come here. I'm just going to delete this. So I have my sampler track. Let me just drag the audio file into my sampler track. And then as I So I'm just playing the MIDI note to trigger it. And then I could set my pitch bend wheel amount. And we can set the pitch bend range right here. So now as I just, record the MIDI, so it's a pitch bend up. So just drop into the sampler track, then you could use your pitch bend wheel and just, play one note, and then you could just have the pitch bend control that. Okay, so we see from Robert Higgins, thanks again, Greg, you're great. So I'm just glad to be able to help. All right, so we see from PETA, I'm unable to see the sound waves in area at the top where tracks are listed, but they appear when I double click on the files and open in the editor below. So it could be maybe at a particular size. So, if it's like really short, you may not see the waveform. And then if you double click, then you see it in the sample editor. So make sure that it's actual, the height is enough to show a waveform, but if all your tracks are like super small in size, it may not show the waveform. So see if it's anything like that. Another thing that it could be, usually if we see the waveform at the bottom or in the editors, that means that the waveform image is there. But if you go into the media menu and let's go to the pool, that one of the things you could do is select the file, and you may see like if it doesn't have a, if you don't see the waveform image here, you may, if it's missing kind of the thumbnail cache, you could right click and say generate thumbnail cache, but it has one. So this is kind of grayed out, but so try going into, let's see if it's just available in the media menu. So, try selecting the generate thumbnail cache as well, if that's an option. All right, so we see from Eric Johnson, I purchased a crossgrade from Sweetwater. I have Studio One 5 Pro. I no longer have the purchase receipt for Studio One. On Steinberg site, I read I could use screenshots of my account and license number. Where do I send that information to activate my Cubase Pro license? So I think that there is like an email address. Let me just see. I'll just Google. And you should be able to send it to Sweetwater as well. All right, and let me see if we go to add to cart. And it might be kind of just during the process, but you should be able to. But, as Sweetwater is a dealer that's doing it, you should be able to send that verification to them, and then they should be able to process it. And, because Sweetwater is the only dealer that does it. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of, find out the direct answer for you. All right, so we see, is it possible to have two channel setting windows open at the same time? So let's say I wanted to see this window for this channel, and I wanted to see this channel at the same time. So let's say I'll put a nasty EQ in this one and not on the other. So there's a preference. So let's come over to the preferences, And I think it's maybe under editors, editor follows event selection. So let's uncheck that. And now I open up this editor and open up this editor. I think that we could let me make sure I got that actually that preference selected. Yeah. So I think it's that was the preference. Let me just confirm again. Let's do new project here. And so I thought it was here in the preferences that the event selection, let me just so I thought it was this little preference that allowed you to do that. We just check it one more time. I'll check it with it off. So it's channel 1. Let's say channel 2, and I'll try toggling the preference one more time. Yeah, so I thought that was it, but I'll play with it and have an answer on Friday's live stream, or if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'm probably just having just a quick brain cramp on that. Sorry about that. So we see from Jeff Sabelski, it's on the Dorco. So hopefully Shift V will allow me to distinguish more than 2 voices on a single staff measure as well, since I'm transcribing piano. So yeah, you can hit Shift V, and then you hit the arrow up and arrow down keys to add more. So. All right, so we see from Ziggy Edison, there's got to be a way to help you index. Can you record a video showing the time, your video and your chat timeline point all at the same time? I could, but it probably wouldn't actually help so much because sometimes the questions are at a completely different time when they're asked as when they happen, and sometimes I may have to rephrase questions and stuff like that. But it takes a little while, but I think that the effort is worth it for the community. Okay, so we see John Barry. It looks like I may have missed John's question. About assigning a keyboard shortcut or MIDI remote to the AB button on the VST effects button next to the sidechain button. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Sorry, I missed it, John. And if I accidentally missed your question, always feel free to jump in just like you did. All right, so let's say I have. All right, so let's say now I have 16 triplets, and now I have half notes, so I want to toggle back and forth between this. All right, so let's go to our MIDI remote. Okay, so we'll go to edit, toggle AB settings. Okay, so I have this assigned. So now when I'm in the plugin and the plugin window may have to be active, we could just toggle between the A and B button just by hitting that. So again, just double click, and then you could just search in and when you go to the mapping assistant, open up the functions here and just type in toggle AB, and you'll find it under the edit. So toggle A/B. And then once you have that particular plugin open, that button will just simply toggle back and forth between the A/B settings. So sorry about that, John, and thanks for circling back with that. All right, so you see Jay Hatchie just asked, I have to use the time stretch tool to get it to snap to the grid. So I think this is kind of going back to our kick sample. Let me see if I still have that project open. And just come back to... Okay. Okay, so I'll go ahead and try this process again with this. All right, so we have 64 measures of it. Okay, so I'm going to select the range selection tool here. All right, so let's look at the end of it. So I'm going to come at this point and let's do a replace. So I'm going to do bounce selection. We replace the events. Okay, and then you put it into musical mode. Okay, so now as I extend this over, and we'll solo this, we'll see if it's still with the click. So I did the replacement. We put it into musical mode, and let's say you did it to 16th notes. I think you set the grid, but I don't have, like the first time I did it, it had a little bit of overhang, and I didn't time stretch it. I just kind of resized it to snap to the grid, but on this one, I didn't have, when I did it again the second time, so let's go ahead and duplicate it a bunch of times here. And we'll see if it's still on the grid, as you can see, and here. And that event is in musical mode. And we have our grid set to use quantize to 16th notes. So let me know if I missed anything. So maybe I had extended it over on that, but I didn't time stretch it. On the first one, all I did was take that very first event, in the rendered file, and I just resized it and had that snap and then duplicated it. So if you're using the time stretch tool to get it to snap, then that's going to, don't use a time stretch tool to get it to snap, because if you're time stretching it, then everything will be off. You want it to just use a normal sizing if it does hang over. All right, so you see PETA just saying that was it. I think that was with maybe the waveforms not being visible. All right, so we see Bruce. Bruton just says Sweetwater's running a 36-month, same as Cash Deal on Hallion 7 through the end of the month, so $349. All right. See, Eric Johnson says, thank you, Jazzy. I already forgot the email address. So if you wanted to send a particular, if you wanted to send like an email to reach out to me, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay. See, Ziggy Edison says, feed the furball, Greg. We are less important. Yeah. He ate right before I came on the live stream. So if I could get through the live stream, he can too, but he'll be okay. My son just got home, so he'll probably feed him. So he'll be okay. He's a tough cat. All right, so Val Lou asks, is it possible to get a preference to raise or lower the volume of a clip or event with the mouse wheel plus button? The wheel alone lets me messing up too much stuff. I mean, so not with the mouse button, but we could take, if we have this preference, so let's go under preferences to editing, and maybe under project and mix console. Let me see if it's... So maybe under audio, we'll come to use mouse wheel for event volume. So you could, activate that preference. So now if I'm just over, we could use the mouse wheel to scroll. You could also just come directly to the info line and adjust the volume here. So you could adjust the clip gain directly right there in the info line. And if you hold down shift, you can do kind of like a fine control. So if you don't want it to do it there, but you can do it directly on the selected event and shift for fine control. And if you click in the region, you could also adjust your fades using your mouse scroll wheel as well. So again, go to that preference, and under editing audio, use the mouse scroll wheel. You could do that, but the info line I think works well because you kind of intentionally go there. All right, so project says, I've tried to import drum audio from Pro Tools, but it's not lining up to the grid. Is there an easy way to do this? There seems to be an additional section added, Cubase 12 Pro imported from AAF. So let me know, if, so the AAF may not necessarily line up to the grid. The AAF is just going to have probably the relationship of the audio files to themselves with some rudimentary editing. But you may have to, if you have your timeline in seconds versus bars, and you could switch your master timeline here by right-clicking or going into your primary and secondary time displays here. So we can say, okay, now I want to see my primary time display in bars and beats. But let me know, if, you take the files, if you import audio files, they probably have a timestamp. So if we go to a particular project, let me just go to this, so I could take a particular file here and we could select all of the files that are in your particular project and go to move to origin. So, and that would place the file directly in their timestamp position. So, but make sure that you actually are set to bars and beats and not to seconds. And make sure also there could be a chance that, the sample rate may have changed as well. All right, so we see Studio just says, thank you, Greg. I love you so much. You're the best. Thank you for the kind words. All right, and we see Gerald Ely has made it back, so glad he could make it. All right. See, Benny says, today I learned a lot of new stuff. Thanks, Greg. I think that's the great part of the live stream format is people learning from other people's questions. All right, so I think I made it to the top, to the end of the questions. So I know we had questions that were submitted. So let me go ahead and take a look at some of those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And if everyone has learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. And that will allow us to continue to offer this as a service for 8 hours a week. All right. Just get this one project open and we'll get started. All right, so jump to our questions that were sent in. All right, you see we're at 108 likes. Thank you so much. All right, so last week we had a question on how to automatically look at, so if we had different MIDI CCs that were in a part, so let me just come over, say, okay, we had like modulation data and expression and volume on our particular events, how to automatically kind of show all of the used controllers. So let's say we're just directly here. Okay, so there is a little function that we could do. So if you're in the key editor and want to see all of the available controllers, if we go to the key commands, there is a show used controllers. So, and I just have this as, I may have set this up myself, and this will be under MIDI, so show used controllers. So now when I come and I could just say, I have I have a keyboard shortcut assigned. Now any MIDI CC that's in the part will automatically just show for you. So you could set up a key command to do that. So just one particular key command. So if you have any MIDI CCs that are in the part, just set up a key command for show used controllers. All right, so we had a question: how to make loops and loops fit the tempo and key of a project. Okay, so let's say we want to do a new project and we want our loops to automatically fit, and when we have musical elements with pitch, we want those to kind of fit the key as well. So let's come over here and go to our loops and samples. I'm going to start with maybe a quick drum loop. Okay, so all right, so we'll just say, okay, I want a drum beat. Okay, so let me just. All right, so let's say I want that drum beat in. Okay, so now this is, since it has the metadata, it's already placed it into musical mode automatically, what people were kind of asking for. So this is automatically following. Now let's say I want to do kind of a different instrumental, so maybe like an arpeggiator. So as we drag this in, that's going to automatically fit the tempo. So let's say I want to do a bass. All right, and let me just do kind of a maybe an organ part. We'll just randomly throw some stuff in. All right, and I'll just. Okay, so I'm going to drag this in. So now we have all of these are fitting the same. Let's say maybe these aren't fitting in musically together, like the pitches. So we could think of our, as I just drag these loops in, they're automatically fitting, but speed-wise, tempo-wise, but maybe not pitch. So if we go to our settings, we're going to activate our project root key. So once we've done our project root key, we'll see this little icon appear. And now I can say I want all the pitched files to now play in the key of D. So all of the files will now pitch. So if I say, okay, let's play in the key of G. I want it to be in A. Or based around a tonality of D. So using the project root key, we could then take all of the loops that have pitches and that have them automatically fit together as well, so that we could get them to fit tempo-wise and pitch-wise. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I was wondering if it's possible to select a dotted quarter note as the main beat, like in this song. Is there a way to do that? I'm using Cubase 12 Pro on Mac. So currently when we set tempo, it's just going to be based on like the particular quarter note as opposed to a dotted quarter note. Generally, the only time that you would use like a dotted quarter note is when you actually go to print out the notation. So when printing out notation, let's say we have our tempo at, let's say 90 beats a minute. So as we play this, and I wanted to add an instrument track. So, when this is going to be utilized primarily is for notation purposes. So when we come, and if I wanted to go to my score editor for a particular event, We could go to our symbols, and then we'll see, just find the symbol here real quick. Let's see if it's under, but there is a, okay, so you see that under form symbols, we could just come right here. So we know that our project is at a quarter note equals 90. So as soon as I click here, we could just say our quarter note is equal, and then we could have that automatically change. I think this may just change the display. So let me just go back to our score editor. Let's say if we have our tempo set, but this will automatically kind of do the change. Let me go to all right, so now when you come here, we say quarter note equals 90. That, you know, so when we, let me just erase this. Sorry. So I think if we double click on this, we could say, okay, we want to do a dotted quarter. So, but we could indicate it here. So let me just put it as quarter note equals that. But there's a way to automatically have the tempo value adjust. Or let's put it, I'm sorry, let's do it like this. So grab the tempo value here, and we see that the quarter note is equal to 90. You right click and say a dotted quarter, and then it usually does like the formula to automatically map that. Let me just, okay, I'll just do, so then we can say like a dotted half note, and then you could set kind of the value there, and that will update the tempo changes for you. But yeah, but I'll pass that along as a feature suggestion just for kind of delay. Okay, so covered that one. Okay, so we see I'm struggling with Superior Drummer 3. I can't seem to route anything to the correct mono or stereo bus. Also, when using the AF import, I can't seem to get audio to line up on a grid. Any advice that would be appreciated. So if you're doing it with a particular plugin, so I'm not sure, I don't have Superior Drummer 3 on my work system, but I can show you like how it works with like Groove Agent SE, which would probably be very similar. So once you have a instrument that has multiple outputs, all you would need to do, and if you're doing it, I'll show it in like an acoustic agent kit, which would be similar. Okay, so if you go to the VSTI here, we'll see, okay, we have Groove Agent SE, and what you want to do is to activate outputs, and then you could activate all of the outputs, and then once you do that, all the outputs that are supported by the instrument, then within the instrument, you could say, okay, I want this to go out of output 2, output 3, output for etc. So we could remap our different outs so that as it plays, they will all be kind of broken down into multiple outputs. So we can see our 32 outputs there. So, but maybe in the instrument rack, just come over here and then you'll see click, and then you could activate all of the outputs right there. Okay, so we see, is there a way to have a subwoofer that is plugged into a separate output act as a changeable frequency extender and then an LEF, I guess an LFE? So, generally if we're utilizing a particular format for, since we're dealing with stereo or 5.1, generally when dealing with, LFE channels, so when we're dealing with stereo, Cubase is outputting a stereo file. And then generally, if you wanted the LFE, your subwoofer, to do that, you would take the outputs from Cubase because it's, we're not outputting 3 files because the mix down is going to be stereo. So it's outputting the stereo. And then, so if you're doing stereo, what most people do is take it into the subwoofer and use the crossover frequency there to match your main speakers. But since Cubase is dealing with everything in stereo, it's going to treat it as a stereo file. So that's why it doesn't have like a distinct output. But when we're dealing with 5.1 or getting more into more immersive formats like Dolby Atmos, at that point it is a distinct channel. But with dealing with stereo, you'd want to utilize, the proper way to do it is to utilize the crossovers that are set up in your particular subwoofer. So generally you take the stereo outs of your audio interface into the sub. It's going to do the crossover and take the outputs of the sub into the speakers. Okay, so we had a question last week about the drum editor, if it's possible to actually mute the drum sound. So I kind of brought it up in a forum, and it is there, but it is incredibly subtle. So if we have this set up in our drum editor, so I will create a quick drum map from the instrument. And as we do this, okay, so this is incredibly subtle. Hopefully it'll be more obvious in the future. So let me just create, here, I'll just do it on this one here. We'll just create the drum map. Since it has the instrument loaded, okay. And, I realize that this indication of the mute status is incredibly subtle. So let's say when we do click in the mute column, so it is, if you look ever so slightly, you'll see a darker circle, and I realize that this is bad, and I brought it to their attention. But there is, like, as you click, you can see that it's kind of an off black with a black in the muted column. So, so if we look here, we can see that these two are muted, these two channels, this one isn't. So it is there. It is a bad design. It's not a great design, but it is actually present. All right, so we see another follow-up question. I brought this up with the issue of supervision not staying put. I have 3 monitors configured like this. Okay, so we have different monitor resolutions. So it looks like kind of a widescreen monitor and maybe like a 1080p monitor followed on the right-hand side, but different resolutions. and also monitor 3 on top. So it says in screen 1, which is kind of a widescreen monitor, and screen 2 is a secondary screen. So they're at the same level, and screen 3 is above. Use these screens for project and mix console windows and workspaces determines what goes where. When I replace screen 2, I got one screen left over, screen 3. I had no idea. I had the idea to dedicate more or less the screen to supervision. However, when I close and reopen a project, supervision is moved to screen 1. This means that I need to reposition it every time. This also happens most of the time, but not always. When I switch workspaces, sometimes it moves to screen 1. Behind the project window and covering the whole screen, this means I'm not only forced to reposition supervision, but resize it as well. It's quite annoying having to go through this every time I open a project. It looks like this issue is Cubase plus supervision specific. It doesn't appear to happen to other plugins in Cubase per 12.052. They stay where I put it. Neither does it appear with Wavelab Pro. So I'll pass that along. I'm not sure if they have the exact monitor configuration at the office, but I only have 2 screens, so I can't really test it, but I'll pass it along and see if we get any information. All right, and then also there's a question about if the Steinberg instruments worked standalone with Motu interfaces. So it seems like it is going to be that there are issues with it. So, generally as Cubase works with any, like when running the instruments in standalone, it just utilizes the core audio drivers. So it shouldn't really matter what audio interface it's playing back from. So I'm not sure if that's so much of a Cubase issue, but you'd indicate it that it worked correctly with your Behringer interface, and it also worked correctly with, and it also is working with Halion 7 and Halion Sonic 7. So I'm not sure if it's working with one interface, it's using the same driver protocol, on Mac or Windows for that. So it shouldn't really have an impact on which driver it is. And if it does, it seems like it would be perhaps more up to the manufacturer. All right, and we also had a question, will there be some videos on Halion Sonic 7 coming? We see a lot of videos for Halion 7. So yeah, I'm going to be working on some Halion Sonic 7, kind of pointing out some of the new features. So just kind of look for that coming up. So sometimes when I create videos, it may be a little while before they come up, but it's being worked on as we speak. All right, let me jump back to live questions. And again, thanks for all of the great questions that we've had. Let me see if we have some more. We're doing pretty well in time. We have about 14 minutes left before we lose all of our closed captioning. Okay, just finding my place. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Lucy Godfrey on. Glad you can make it to the live stream today. All right, so we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Okay, so we see Kevin Booth is helping me with my brain cramp. So it says to assist on the channel, showing 2 channels showing at the same time, you have to click on Option on your keyboard. So let's take a look at that. Thank you. All right, so let's say hold down Alt or Option. Yes, so thank you for the reminder. So once again, hold down Alt or Option, and then you could just click on the edit channel settings like that. Thank you so much for that clarification. I appreciate it, Kevin. So we see from Ziggy Edison, cannot understand your index process, but personal video recording will have your voice, YouTube video at the same time together, no doubt about value, but can it take less of your time? I don't mind doing it. I think, like by the time I have to type up the questions, I have to kind of listen to it as well. So I think, I could maybe take the transcript from it, but then it's going to have all sorts of weird, transcription errors. And by the time I go through that, like every time I say Cubase, it would spell letter Q, B-A-S-E, stuff like that. So, but, just takes 3 or 4 hours to do. So, and I'm happy to do it and be able to share the information, and people like Jan can put it on their websites of Cubase Index. Great. See people saying rest in peace to Wayne Shorter. Yeah, great loss. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski just saying, Greg Newby, still Dodorko. I'll learn faster, but if not spending more time scraping reads. The caret only shows quarter note on input, but that would be nice for me for the caret note to change values. So I think it does once you're in the right voice. So play around with, like shift V, shift plus the letter V, like voice. All right. All right, so we see Jazz Dude just saying that there are a bunch of, this for Sven Isaacson about the Howling and Sonic videos, Howling and Sonic 7. So, all right, so we see PETA ask, in Cubase Elements 12, am I limited on editing with the editor window, trying to mute areas, etc.? So I think it really kind of works the same way. So if you just wanted to, mute different areas, if you wanted to, just directly from here say, okay, I want to mute or erase a particular section right there, you're able to do that in Elements the same way as you can in the full-blown version of Cubase. Okay, so John Barry says, hi, Greg. The red dot in the download manager was cleared after reinstalling the VST sound content, Anima, Flux, etc. So great. Glad that you got it sorted out. All right, so we see Michael Hasdra just asked, do those 4 dots mean anything, or do they just decorate? So I'm not sure which 4 dots you're talking about, but if you could just send me a reminder of what part of the program had the 4 dots, I'd be happy to kind of figure it out. Sorry about that. See, Val Lu just said, oh, you can have multiple channel settings open. What? So, yeah. Gerald Ely says, really appreciate you taking the time to do the index. So, yeah, just my Tuesday and Friday nights are not as exciting as other people's, but I'm happy to do them. So, see, Michael Teams just says, thanks, Greg, for everything you do for us. It's greatly appreciated here. So, you're welcome. Just glad to help and have everyone be a better Cubase user. So I think also Speaking of that, just before it leaves my mind, March 17th will be our 3-year anniversary of our Club Cubase live stream since COVID started. So we may do a giveaway or two. So March 17th, if you want to win some free software, we'll be doing our live stream trivia. So I'll try to get some good questions. All right, so we see John Barry says, "Hi, Greg. Another call for the channel editor in the lower window. Cheers." So, yeah, I've reiterated that to the team recently, so we'll see what happens. See, Benny wants a Club Cubase live stream T-shirt. That'd be good. So, but you have to send me a video saying how much you like Club Cubase. So. All right, so Sable Winter says she's learned so much today working in the background. All right. All right, so I think the 4 dots. Okay, so Michael Hatcher says the ones on the line at the bottom. So is it these 4 dots here? If that's it, it is the click presets. Let me know if that's it, Michael. So this would be just like your metronome click pattern. All right, John Costin's giving thanks for the indexing. So, see, Val Lou just says maybe this time he'll win VST Connect. Okay, can we prepare a setup about micro tuning? All right, so let's go ahead and just take a quick. Okay, so, if you have like a VST instrument, one of the cool things with VST instruments, with VST like 3.5 instruments, is that you do have the ability of doing micro tuning. So let's say I'll take, you look for the particular project. Yeah, let's do this one. All right, so I'll just do strings here. All right, so now we're going to have, let's say, our strings. So we'll listen to. So I'm going to take my violin 1. Let's get to MIDI inserts. So when we go to our micro tuner plugin, we can just come here if we want to be in pure major. All right, so I'm in B flat. So let's say I want to take my B flat note here. So at this point, we could just. So at that point, your microtuner, you could adjust different tuning temperaments, and like the VST 3.5 instruments have this capability to do actual pure temperament and pure tuning if you wanted to. So you could just say, okay, my root is in B flat. So as I come over here, we could just adjust our different tuning temperaments so that those instruments can play perfectly in tune as we see fit. All right. All right. So Michael Pierce has his soup all cooked. All right, so it's so just kind of seeing in the drum editor the 4 lines. So let me just the 4 dots. So let me just look at it in drum editor. All right, so it's probably these 4 dots. So this is just an area. Sometimes what would happen is this dividing line could be right on the grid. So, and people didn't know where the grid was versus the line to extend functions. So that just gives you an idea that this particular line, like it may be like right on the grid, but this is also where we could grab to, see more additional functions. So if it's those 4 dots, it's just kind of like a handle. And that way we could grab it to extend to show additional functionality, like if we had a drum map assigned to it, versus just what the grid is of the bar. So thank you for the... All right, so we see Mutlu made it from Turkey, so thanks for joining us. Okay, I think we're just at about time. Let's see. So we see from Mutlu, it says, thank you, but this does not happen with instruments other than Steinberg instruments. Does Cubase have a solution for others? The solution is for the other instruments to add the capability. So we can't add the capability. The functionality in Cubase is there. If other instruments aren't doing it, contact those instruments or start using Steinberg instruments. All right, so we see Steve's in. Any hope of getting the old Cubase vocoder VST upgraded to work in newer versions of Cubase? It's currently block listed. It says, in my opinion, it was one of the best vocoders out there by far. So I think there's been some discussion of that, but don't know for sure. But we'll pay attention to that. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So I think we're out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. We'll be back on Friday for the live stream. And again, if you want to share a quick video of how the Cubase live streams have helped you, please feel free to send that. Just like 10 or 15 seconds, could be on your cell phone, a webcam, whatever. That'd be great. And we want to use it in some marketing materials that will be coming up. So everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Goodbye.